creating positives out of negatives, out of creating strengths out of weaknesses. These are all the things that we talk about all the time on this podcast and with our clients as to this is how you create successful business opportunities.
Welcome to the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Good morning, Pritch. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Kyle. How about yourself?
Fantastic. Super happy to be back here with you on the Neo Marketing Podcast.
Yep.
My name is Kyle Golding. This is the Professor Pritch Pritchard, APR PRSA Fellow. And today we're going to talk about us.
Us.
Happy anniversary to us.
Woohoo.
Middle of November is our 10-year anniversary as a business, as the Golding Group.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yes, it's a good thing,
It
right?
is a good thing.
So we're going to not really talk about us. We're going to talk about some lessons that we've learned, some trials and tribulations, and what other people can take from it and apply to their businesses, right?
Yes,
That's
sir.
what we do on the
Absolutely.
podcast, right? We
That's
give
what
you
we do.
lessons and tidbits.
Yep.
And examples. So I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory about how the Golding Group happened. We're going to talk about the fact that nothing was as planned. The things happen.
What a
take
surprise.
advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
Just get started, figure out on the way. The adjustments we've made on the way.
Yep.
Also, other things that have changed in the world, technology and communications, etc.
Right.
And then ultimately some of the big concepts about staying consistent, but making adjustments, about investing in yourself, about being open to opportunities, etc. And ultimately, consistency is in execution and strategy, going back to your why, all of those things. But giving you guys some details as to how it worked for us, so you guys can learn from our real world examples as well. So let's start right off the top, of course, is why did I want to start a business? And I've been a lifelong entrepreneur since I was a teenager. I've started and owned businesses, but I was working in corporate marketing for a good chunk of time, and boy, let me tell you, working in corporate marketing is it's not what it should be. We'll put it to you that way.
It's a five-letter word that starts and ends with S.
So, in my 20 years now of working in marketing and creative communications, etc., I've been in every situation. I've been in, gotten fired, been let go. I've quit, bosses I didn't want to work for, and I have been multiple times been in a situation where actually everything was going great, but marketing is a cost center. And several times the VP of whatever walks in and says, "Thanks for your service, but this department is closed." And the entire department is walked out the door with a severance package because we spent too much money.
Shoot.
Right?
Right.
So my last corporate job I took kind of begrudgingly, because the corporate job before that was the same thing. They just shut the marketing department down because it cost too much money. Now, of course, we all know, I don't think I have to tell anyone in this audience, you got to spend money to make money.
That's right.
Everyone knows the
just
idea.
What I
Spend
was
money
going
to
to
make
say.
money. But on a ledger, if you're going to be audited for a sale or something of that nature, if you can jettison that off of your ledger and claim that those costs don't exist anymore, you might get more money when you sell the company to someone else. That's what happens typically. That's what happens to marketing departments often. So that happened to me. I took another job, actually for way less money than I should have, but there was an opportunity to build a marketing department that didn't exist previously. It was a company that was on the rise.
Right.
And going in, it was like, you guys can hire me for less than I should be getting from you, because I'm going to make a huge amount of bonus on the backside, because I want you to give me a budget. I'm going to give you projections. I'm going to beat them. You're going to make so much more money. I'm going to get bonuses, and let's agree to that. 3 owners of the business say, fantastic, we love the idea. So I took a year of stepping back in salary in order to prove myself to these guys, build something that I thought then could be sustainable because I built it. So that was the situation.
Right.
End of the year, we sit down for the review, and somehow these guys are not happy. And let me tell you why they should be happy. The agreed upon budget. So this was a company that was doing well, was making money, was very profitable, was doing several $1 million a year in sales in printing and direct mail. And I had asked for and had received a $250,000 budget for the year for marketing.
Okay.
Right? And with that, we kept all existing sales and generated an additional $4 million in sales.
Holy smokes.
Off $250,000.
$50,000 budget.
Right. So a
Nice.
very nice 15-to-1 return
Right.
on their investment. Obviously, I went into this meeting thinking I was a rock star. Couldn't wait for my 1 or 2% percentage bonus off of that, which was going to put a great amount of money in my pocket, level out how much they were paying me, and then we could negotiate what the second year looked like.
Right.
Instead, they complained that they had to spend $250,000 in marketing. That was their only complaint.
Okay.
They got stuck on how much money they spent, not understanding
15-to-1. Come on.
the ROI. So we mutually agreed to.
Bye.
They didn't want to do that anymore, and I sure didn't want to work for those guys.
Right.
Left there in the middle of the day, went to my favorite restaurant with a bar in it that's near my house, came in middle of the day and started having cocktails, trying to drown my sorrows. Not knowing what to do.
That's not
right?
atypical either. Right.
You know, just a reactionary, like,
Right.
screw it. The owner of the restaurant, who was a friend of mine, who we'd known each other because it's near the house and we go in there a lot, realized it wasn't a normal day for me. Had to come over and sat down and had a conversation. Was just venting on, can you believe
Right.
that I worked for people who thought that making $4 million off $250,000 was a bad deal for them? And he says, well, I would take those
I'd take it.
returns. I'll take that in a heartbeat. Can you do that for me? So there it is.
There it
Client
is.
number 1 accidentally happened because of a pre-existing relationship.
Right.
So, and I obviously wasn't trying to sell him anything. I didn't have anything to sell him at the time. I was just talking.
You were just venting.
Just talking, but an opportunity happened.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I had to take advantage of my opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
So left that job, decided to take this as an opportunity. I could have taken this as working for that one person or have a single client, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go back to being my own boss and doing my own thing.
Right.
So now I had the freedom to do so. I had a single client.
Right.
I had the opportunity. So I literally stopped drinking alcohol, went home, got out the pen and paper as I bumped my coffee cup. Those of you on the video saw that, but those of you listening on the podcast,
That's just
I
what that
almost
loud
spilled
click
coffee.
was.
I
Yeah.
almost spilled coffee everywhere. So went home and started writing. Started writing a business plan. Started writing concepts, putting together strengths and weaknesses, and the whole nine that I would do, anyways. But I knew that I wanted to play on my experience, but I also knew I needed to do something different.
Right.
So point number 1. Here's the one of the lessons of the day: differentiation.
Differentiation.
I didn't want to create a ad agency.
Right.
Why? Because there were tons of great ad agencies that existed in the city, in the region, etc. I also had relationships with a lot of people already working in those ad agencies, PR firms, graphic design shops.
Right.
I knew a lot of these people. We've been working with a lot of these people. Were associated with them through Ad Club, through PRSA, through AMA, etc. And I couldn't capitalize on those relationships. I couldn't capitalize on my real strengths, what I wanted to do if I started an ad agency, and I was going to go straight into a red ocean.
Right.
So, and I have a funny story about working in ad agencies. I'll tell you at the end. So remind me to tell you about not getting hired at an ad agency for a poor reason, bad judgment on the leadership of that team at the time. So I knew I needed to do something different. I needed some differentiation. I needed to find a niche within the market, something that I could bring to the table that was different, not necessarily better, best, but different.
Right.
Which is how I got to thinking about the concept of business development and strategy, and ultimately what developed into the Golden Group. But essentially, I went from getting fired in the morning, let go in the morning,
Right.
to I've got a new business
Right.
in the evening. to getting the URL and putting a website up the next day.
Sweet.
So quickly, unplanned, but at the end of the day, second tidbit, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you just got to get started.
Yep.
You just got to put yourself out there. You got to get started. You have to make yourself available, and you have to make yourself part of the whole process.
Yep.
Of making yourself available, right? So
a lot like writing. You just have to put something down. Get
you got to
started.
start with a draft, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, through the process, through the feedback from the real world, through the potential of clients and the sales process and the whole thing, you can kind of find out what people are interested in, what they would pay for, what's already out there existing, how to do those things, right? So just getting started. That's the lesson from that. So let me set the table though for you, because this was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the marketing and advertising and communication atmosphere that we have today, right? So first of all, this was a time when the internet was been around for quite a while. It wasn't more than just the AOL, your kids are on a chat room kind of thing.
Right.
But business websites were still complicated. It wasn't nearly democratized as it is now with platforms that you can manage, self-manage, and things of that nature. People were paying a lot of money to be online. There was a lot of opportunity there, but people really hadn't capitalized on it very well. Search engines were still rudimentary. SEO was still a very kind of high concept, and there were a lot of tools to benefit that. Digital marketing, Facebook was a thing, but it wasn't a sophisticated animal that it is today. So today, being able to use Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and iHeartRadio and all kinds of platforms like that with tools that are easily accessible, with great feedback, and that just even Google AdWords, etc. It just was complicated. There was a lot of people intimidated by it. There wasn't a lot of opportunities in it. But at the same time, traditional media was taking a backslide.
Right.
Print definitely was getting beat down. But print and direct mail was really receiving no one's doing that anymore. And even though they were in their advantages, that was the concept.
Right.
TV was definitely the idea of the big three, the big four channels. Cable had been eating into that for years, and now digital streaming and stuff, all still very new and rudimentary, but they were pulling from those traditional avenues of marketing and advertising.
Right.
PR game has definitely changed, obviously, with print, with newspapers and magazines and publications being just not having the readership, the reach, availability that they had 10 and 20, obviously 30 years ago.
Right.
All of these industries were in flux. They were doing something different when that was the opportunity for me to do something different. Again, differentiation, not trying to compete in a traditional way, and offering something that didn't exist at a price point, etc., things of that nature. So taking advantage of the situation. That's just all it was. My situation was bad, but I tried to turn it into something positive. So taking something negative, make it a positive.
Right.
And understanding that things outside of my control, technology and whole industries and attention and communication, even entertainment, all of that was changing and in flux. It's not in my control, but it's something I could take advantage of and kind of offer value in those spaces.
You jumped in there and you helped people that didn't understand take advantage of the technology.
Even cell phones.
Right.
This was a transition from the BlackBerry with the keyboard into into what we call smart devices now with screens, tablets, and things. They were still expensive. They were kind of rare. The tools to utilize them were still super rudimentary, if at all. But obviously, how we approach things today, this last 10 years has been a changing pattern the entire time. So anticipation of that change. We say on this podcast all the time, success comes from the management of change.
Yes, sir.
The last 10 years has definitely been a huge amount of change. And then, of course, you throw 2020 and the capper of the apex
pandemic.
of change, right? So our story, the Golden Group story, our first 10 years in business, because we're already thinking about our next 10 years in business, has been a great deal of change, management of change, and dedication, commitment to that differentiation, to providing something different in the industry that wasn't quite exactly there, but not so radical that people didn't understand what it was.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily disruptive because it didn't change the industry. There's Ad agencies still exist. PR, like all of those traditional avenues exist, and plenty of people are utilizing them to great success. Good on them, fantastic. But there were still opportunities that weren't being fulfilled by those entities that we could come in and provide service and value for. So the emerging technology, the changes in communication, all those things were the opportunities, the downslide, the decline in traditional avenues. And then another thing happened in the same time period here in Oklahoma. For those of you in Oklahoma City who know exactly what I'm talking about, if anyone else out of the state, I'll catch you up here. So we got an NBA team.
Right.
First, it was the New Orleans Hornets. They were displaced by the hurricane. Then they went back to New Orleans, and then ultimately the Seattle team was moved here to Oklahoma City. The biggest point here is, so for my entire life, and before I got into marketing, I worked in the music business. And in the 80s and the 90s, I was in the music business. The entire time I was in the music business, everyone local and everyone would meet when I would travel around the country would say, you can't do that in Oklahoma.
Right.
Jesus, I hated hearing, you can't do that in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the 80s, we had the oil bust and the economy was down and people were trying to come back up. And anyone around the country thought of us as a petroleum state only and very limited. And yes, obviously, there's a whole lot more opportunities in LA and New York and Nashville. When it comes to the music industry, there's also a whole lot more competition as well, and a whole lot more cost and all the things that come along with it as well. So I'd spent my entire life being told, you can't do that in Oklahoma. I'd spent my entire life telling them, well, screw you. I will.
Right.
I will do that in Oklahoma. I will stay based here, and I will have my music production company, and I will work on concert tours and work with national and international artists, and did that through the 80s to the 90s. Right about the end of the 90s, had a thing in my life happen. I broke my neck in 1998,
Dude.
which took me out of the music industry. I couldn't tour the way I used to do, and I was getting older.
Yeah.
What you do in your 20s, you can't do in your 30s, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But transition now, using my degrees that I'd originally, my PR degree I'd gotten back in the day, was finally using it, and my experience in the music industry with promotions and with communications and managing people and just running a business. I'd been running businesses for a long time, knew how to run a business. That was the opportunity I wanted to take. And that was in 2000. That's how I got into corporate marketing, communications. These were the things that I knew. I just had to take off the rock and roll hat and put on the corporate suit and tie, if you will, and go play the game.
Right.
Got burnt out by that. That's how I transitioned back into doing the Golden Group. So that's the story of the transition. When I worked corporate marketing, I always had a side hustle. I've always owned a business. Since 1985, I've owned a business, sometimes 2 and 3 at a time, and sometimes while I had corporate jobs.
Right.
I always liked to freelance and do things on the side when I worked corporate marketing because it kept me kind of fresh and engaged.
Yeah.
When you work corporate
and
marketing,
up to date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you work in a corporate marketing environment, you use the same logo, the same cut line, the same color scheme, the same things over and over again, because that's the value you create. Yes, the value you create and that consistency. But as the person doing it, it can become quite mundane. I always had a side hustle. I was doing graphic design, doing art direction, doing photography and things like that on the side, still doing a little bit of music production here and there. That kind of kept me fresh, kept me engaged. It kept my creative mind from getting too bogged down. So here's another point for you out there, folks. If you're a boss, if you're a business owner, and this is so much more prevalent in 2021 and will be more in 2022 as well, do not be uptight or worried or nervous or even mad about your employees having side hustles.
Right.
There was a time in the corporate world where they hated the idea that I had a side hustle. There were plenty of times where I applied for jobs and they were like, "Oh, well, we looked you up online and we see you have this side. What's this business?" Right. "Well, it's just a side thing." "Well, we don't want to hire you for the 9 to 5 because we think you're more invested in that. We think maybe you'll quit and go do that." I'm like, that's not really the case, but
it's hard to overcome.
That was the attitude then.
Yeah.
Today is completely different. Like I said, with gig economy, obviously Uber and things of that nature weren't around then. So if you got an employee, a 9 to 5 employee, full-time employee, but they have a side hustle, driving for Uber or delivering for one of the foods, or they have a business. If they're a graphic designer, if they're a photographer, as long as they're not directly actually taking competition from you.
Right.
If you're an ad agency, you can't let your team go like be creative directors on the
Right.
side. Or doing graphic design on the side. But if you're a corporate shop, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in hospitality, if you're in travel transportation, and your marketing people have a little bit of side hustle doing some marketing for some mom and pops or for a local nonprofit or something of that nature, you should embrace that. You should actually encourage that.
Absolutely.
Right? People need to have some variety in their life, especially when it comes to creative expression.
Well, it keeps you sharp. It keeps you up to date, and helps the creative juices continue to flow.
Yes, for sure. And if you're afraid that their side business may do so well that they're going to leave you and move on to it, you actually should be encouraging that. You should be happy that they sort of graduate from working for you to working for themselves, because the relationship you have with them, the potential that you might hire them on the side to do things for you has so much more potential, and you can replace that 9-to-5 position. Then I'm trying to squash that from someone who's trying to build something for themselves.
Right.
Because some people just kind of graduate from jobs anyways, just because of age and too much experience. You can't pay them enough, etc. So be encouraging as a boss of people's side hustles. I think it makes them better employees, better hourly employees, if they have something else that keeps them motivated in that way. But back to the idea of the Thunder. So you can do that in Oklahoma. They've always told us that you can't. Now we know we can. They said, you'll never have pro sports. Well, we have it, and they were being successful.
Yes.
And it's not talking about changing my attitude. I always had the attitude you could do anything, but it changed the attitudes of local business leaders, of regionally, and from people all over the country that doing business in Oklahoma, that these ideas of how it used to be and oil bust, and even further than that. There were people all over the country who thought we all lived on an Indian reservation on dirt roads. Like, that's not how the world. No, that's not what these things are. These things are modern entities now. There's, they have the stereotypes. So
everybody thought I was coming to Oklahoma to go to college in a covered wagon.
Right. So that opened the door to just attitude and the ability to work. And then, of course, technology was with the internet and with cell phones and all those things, communication. You weren't just limited to, you could only work for a client that you could go drive over there and see them, in person. You could work for people all over the country. You could do file transfers, and especially like building a website. You didn't need to be in the same town as someone to build their website because they could look at it online. So all of these things were happening at the same time. And again, we were trying to take advantage of it as well. Just following strengths, not worrying about a competition, trying to, just trying to do what you do. Not trying to disrupt, but trying to find a avenue to provide value. Some people get real focused on, we're going to disrupt, because they like the idea, the sort of rebellious idea of like, we're going to turn everything on its head. That's fine if that's what the industry needs, it's what consumers need. But it's more important to do something that provides value, that solves a problem, that fixes something.
Value add.
Exactly. It's more important to be positive and beneficial in that way than to go in and disrupt the industry. If it happens to disrupt, then the industry deserved it, and that's fine. Right?
Right.
So along the way, of course, following opportunities, losing the zest. And then, so let's go back to the very beginning. The day I decided it was going to become a thing, right? I obviously was working from my house.
Right.
In fact, the first year I worked from home. Way before anybody was doing it. Before it was cool.
Right.
I had a great little office set up in my house because I was freelancing and doing side work.
Yeah.
And so I worked from home the first year trying to put this thing together, trying to figure out what it was. I had that single client. I had to develop more clients. Now, luckily, because I'd been freelancing, because I'd been always doing things, because I'd been involved in PRSA and Ag Club, etc., I had all these connections and relationships, and I could start building some business that way. But kept it simple.
Right.
Nothing fancy. Simply working from home to make things happen. But I also knew there are a lot of things I don't know. So self-realization, understanding how to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses includes collaboration with other people. So I reached out to two friends of mine who eventually became my business partners, two incredibly smart people who were also looking for an opportunity. Of course, that's Felicity Mormon and Sean Hawley. Yep. And they are my first business partners, and we put together the group in Golding Group. The Golding is me, but the group is the group, right?
Right.
Seems pretty obvious. Still, again, trying to capitalize on the relationships I'd had in marketing and public relations established already. But Felicity is an attorney. She
Right.
brings a completely different mindset about emerging technology. Sean is a systems guy, is a corporate systems guy, and just builds these things in different ways. Very not marketing,
Right.
which was intentional,
Right.
because I was trying to not be pigeonholed into a marketing and advertising guy,
Right.
because it goes back to the idea of like that already exists in the world. Let's do something different.
Right.
But relationships are the key. These were people that I knew or were friends with that I already had respect for their thought process, etc. So the relationships and taking a chance, be giving of myself too. It'd be super easy to go, hey, come work for me. But instead I needed partners. I wanted
Right.
to work with people
Right.
who brought things at that level, who invested at that level. So that was super important for me as well. Along with investing in yourself, became time to get the first office. So I was looking for a place for an office, but again, we didn't want to be the typical
Right.
downtown buttoned up agency, right? I was
Right.
looking for something different, something unique, something that set us apart. That's how I ended up at 1219 Creative, 12th and Classen. A friend of mine had bought the building and actually didn't know what he was going to do with it, because his building was adjacent to it. And by luck, someone mentioned, because I was telling everyone who would listen, I'm looking for a warehouse, or I'm looking for an office, a conversion or something. Hey, this person has this. You should go over here and do this. And it worked out. And it worked into a now different, unique space, because it was a collaborative space. It was co-working, but we had an art gallery too, of all things. Combining interest I had personally and the relationship I had with the building owner, and trying to, again, be distinctively different. Something that just wasn't in the local market,
Right.
to set us apart. But it happened. Some people would call it synergy. Some people would call it dumb luck. Some people would call it by accident. But being able to go into a space that someone else wanted to do something similar with, but allow us the freedom to do so, and not getting structured into here's how things have always done. It just worked out.
Yeah.
But we took advantage of the opportunity.
Yep.
So the collaboration with 1219 was huge. The next thing that happened was the opportunity to go to Philadelphia. A single client in Philadelphia, but a good sized client, lots of business to be done there. We were traveling to Philadelphia, and to try to see if this was something that could be a long-term opportunity. It was a long-term opportunity, and we had to decide, do we want to take it or not? Now, Felicity and Sean had both gone to the University of Maryland, so they have background on the East Coast.
Yep.
And they were willing to take that on, to take that risk. So you got to take risk to capitalize on the opportunity that was ahead of us. And it was something that probably a month before we started working with that client, we definitely were not targeting Philadelphia
Right.
or the East Coast at all. We were just looking for an opportunity that fit our strengths, that we could provide value. That was the client. That was the relationship. It was going to work out. So we took the risk. We committed to it. And Sean and Felicity moved out to Philadelphia, and they've been there ever since. Connecting with that client,
Yeah.
eventually taking over the whole thing, and it's the whole nother conversation that's too long for this podcast already. But taking advantage of the opportunity, making the adjustment.
Yeah.
And it was something that wasn't planned, but it still, when the offer happened, when the opportunity came in front of us, it made sense because we had a sense of who we were and what we were doing.
Yep.
And it made sense to take that on. So it's a balance of taking advantage of opportunities, but making sure they're the right opportunities for the right reasons.
Staying true to yourself.
Right. And
Yeah.
something that can be sustainable too. We weren't going to move them out there for 6 months.
Right.
It was something that needed to have that kind of commitment. And then we made that commitment. So we invested in ourselves by making that commitment. And of course, they took the biggest risk,
Right.
moving themselves and their family out there and all of the things that come along with it. Now they're seeing the rewards of it, which is fantastic, of course, right? But along the way, we had another opportunity. An opportunity came along when a brilliant young man by the name of Pritchard, who was at the time really killing things at the University of Oklahoma in the PR department, working with the young people, shaping the minds of the future, teaching those kids the right way to do things.
Give me an amen.
That's right. When Pritchard says to me, last couple of years, I've written a book, I've had some other projects, and now I'm looking for something to do. I'm looking for something I can sink my teeth into. And I looked that opportunity right in the mouth and said, yes, sir.
Well, it was exactly as you said. I wanted to keep my hand in. I'm teaching, but I realized, I think when we had our first conversation, that I'd been out of uniform for close to 20 years,
right,
and hadn't practiced public relations in a long time. So, yeah, this was a great side hustle. And I hope I brought some value to the table on this. But
for sure. You guys have heard me say in the podcast plenty of times, I do PR. This man's the master of PR. Allowing ourselves to think differently. We weren't looking at adding a PR element or additional PR element. We were doing some work because, like I said, I have capabilities. But the opportunity came aboard for us to do that, add the skill set, etc. You also were saying, I also want to do other things, not just PR, which of course was another opportunity, but we invested ourselves in it as well. But the next opportunity that came from that was, now that Pritch is in the fold, he's in the family, he's a partner, we started off with a video show that we were doing where the two of us just talking to each other. We called it Conversations because we were just chatting. And it was dipping our toe into podcasting. Now, here we are. This is episode 131.
Holy Moses.
Right. We've been doing this a while.
We're
committed to podcasting. This works. But we had the opportunity to do it because we were open to the situation where we could work together. And again, it wasn't planned, but taking advantage of the situation, adjusting, changing how we were going forward because we had an opportunity to add something of value.
Right.
Now opened up to the possibility of having a regular podcast and adding different offerings, different services to the core of the business. Of course, we took advantage of it and we ran with it. That's something that wasn't planned, but once it became available to us, it made sense. We understand who we were, our core offering, how this would bring value, beneficial to you and us. Relationships are supposed to be both ways.
Yeah.
Not just simply this is good for us, but is it good for Pritch too? And the flexibility you needed to, as you were trying to transition away from the University of Oklahoma, allowing that space and freedom to do both and be in control of your own destiny, if you will.
Yep.
And the flexibility, I could have said, yes, but you have to quit your job and come work here, right? Well, that wouldn't have worked out. You weren't going to, and that would have been a bad idea. So being inflexible would have ruined that, or having too many demands, or not trying to be collaborative with you, but simply trying to be more of a owner and employer versus some
owner founder.
Right. And those days of it's my way or the highway, this is how we do things, hard structure, no matter what industry you're in, this doesn't happen in 2021, or at least it shouldn't, and it's not sustainable to move forward with.
Right.
And of course, then, as we were working with the good people at 1219 Creative, we've added Pritch Pritchard to the fold because Sean and Felicity are in Philadelphia, completely consumed by that client and that pursuit. We lost our lease at 1219 Creative. The owner of the building sold it. The new owner didn't want us there. We had to find something new. Not planned.
Right.
Actually detrimental to what we've been building, detrimental to the brand. We could have panicked.
I remember those days.
Right?
Absolutely.
We could have panicked. We could have got very angry. At times we were angry. But ultimately, we had to move forward with looking at this setback, this disadvantage as an advantage. We had to create a strength from this weakness, which was finding a new place for our office. Again, we didn't want to be that downtown, buttoned-up, high-rise agency. We didn't want to be all those things that existed. We wanted to be outside of the core. We wanted to be outside the norm a little bit. And we liked collaborating with the business owner, bringing value to them, bringing value to their space. That's how we ended up here, Project 3810.
And the co-working space in 1219 set the course.
Exactly. And we were one of the first people to do that in Oklahoma City years and years ago, with offering co-working, offering flexible availability for the office, having that event space in the front with the art gallery, and doing community events and doing non-revenue events. Just awareness, just connection, just community. really set a trend. Now, a lot of people are doing it, and I think it's fantastic. It's so good for Oklahoma City. It goes back to that. You can't do that in Oklahoma City? Sure. There's a ton. There's a ton of co-working options, from by the hour, by the day, by the week, monthly leases, all types of collaboratives around town. There's many of them. I couldn't name all of them. There's so many of them now. And that is good for business. That's good for the economy, the ecosystem, the whole nine, and the continuation of these attitudes of we can do whatever we want in Oklahoma City if the people want to do it. And they'll make the effort and make the investment in it. Take a risk, if you will.
Yep.
All of this, though, now, when you try to kind of wrap this all up and put a bow on it, is this 10-year journey of trying to take advantage of opportunities, of making adjustments, of changing, of managing that change, of creating positives out of negatives, out of creating strengths out of weaknesses. These are all the things that we talk about all the time on this podcast and with our clients as to this is how you create successful business opportunities. And we're sort of walking the walk as much as we're talking the talk. And that's why I wanted to discuss it on the podcast today. It's not about look at us and look how great we are, but we're doing the same things that we say. We're eating our own dog food. If that's what Gary Vee calls it, eating your own dog food. And we believe in it because we live it. And again, none of this was what I wrote down in that piece of paper that first day that I was so mad about losing that corporate job and was going to do all these things differently, right? There's some basic ideas, core tenets. At the end of the day, core values are there.
Right.
But the execution and the opportunities and how from one client making a couple of bucks to as many clients as we have now making the kind of income that we have and all of that, none of that was planned.
Right.
But it was anticipated. And that's the attitude and the ideas behind building a successful business in 2021.
Right. Absolutely. And vision has been a key piece of that all the way along.
That's right. So we have evolved, not being reactionary, but being evolutionary by continuing to develop and grow. We've been doing what we do a long time. I said I've been an entrepreneur since I was 15 years old.
Right.
In 1985, you guys can do the math on that.
Right.
But still having an attitude every day that I can learn something new, that I can adjust, I can do something different, that I can collaborate with other people, I can bring people in of influence, I can listen to their feedback, listen to what they say. I might have great ideas, but so do they, and finding the right solution for the client or for the situation, so that evolution, that non-reactionary, continually to be positive, to just work and move forward. And then you get to in the conversation of how does this move you forward to the next 10 years? Right? 10-year anniversary says, well, what are you going to do for the next 10 years? Exactly the same thing. Right. We're going to do what we do, stick to our core values. We might have conversations about what that might be from time to time, but continue to our core offering, our core values, service people the way we wish they want to be served, and taking advantage of the opportunities as they come to us with the strengths that we have, and avoiding things that we can't offer value because they're not our strengths. Simple enough. Providing value in that way, in a fair way, and creating opportunities that create other additional opportunities, those relationships you build, etc. So it's not about how much money you make or how much you make per week, per project, how much each client is bringing in, but the relationship you can build that can be sustainable so that we can plan for a future of the next 10 years.
There we
10
go.
after that and the 10 after that.
There you go.
So quick story. I'll wrap it up. We went a little long this time, but I want to slip this in. So back in the mid-90s when I was working corporate marketing, at some point I decided maybe I should leave corporate and go work at an ad agency. Made a lot of sense, right? I knew a ton of people at a lot of agencies because of the relationships I had had. At the time, the agency in this story, and I'm not going to tell you who they are, they were kind of an up-and-coming agency. So they were adding positions and adding people, and they had a creative director job. And I was ready to be a creative director. I'd been a designer, and I'd been in all these things, and was ready to be a creative director. I'm ready to make that move. Took the interview with the vice president of whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Awesome interview. I knocked out of the park. He loved my portfolio. Great conversations. We had a lot of meeting of the minds. I was sitting there thinking, I literally thought, not only is this going well, he's going to offer me this job right now.
Right now.
I'm getting this job today. That's how well it went. Not being like too full of myself, but it just was going that well. Every answer was fantastic and great, and the body language, all that. And the conversation starts going on and on. Love your book, love your attitude, love your background. All this is fantastic, super, super. Here I am. Here comes the offer.
Right.
And then he says, I'm not hiring you because you're the kind of guy who will have my job in 2 years.
Oh, jeez.
Now, folks, do I have to tell you why?
No.
That's the failure, is this individual held back the company, held back an asset that he thought would bring value to the company and help them grow, and they were a growing company. They needed this for his own personal scenario.
Protection.
How silly is that? The irony is he's still second in command in that organization today, and they have grown, expanded. They're very good at what they do. They're very profitable. They're very successful. I say, hey, great. Good on you. But in that 30 seconds of why I'm not hiring you, I really didn't know what to say. And of course, the next weeks of, can you believe this happened to me? I was really stung by it. Now, whatever, 20 years later, I can look back, have a little bit of a chuckle about it. But there's a nugget there, which is make sure everyone in your organization understands that bringing people in of value is always good. Rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
You bring in someone who's great, who's under you.
Right.
You can't be fearful of them taking your job. It should be using that to motivate you to be better at your job. If you have employees who would not hire someone who's great because they're afraid of keeping their role, that's the employee you need to get rid of.
That's exactly
or change that attitude with them. If they're valuable enough to you, you have to change that attitude. But make sure that everyone understands that the more good people, the more people with skills, the more people with experience, the more rock stars that you can bring in. It's not to tear you down. It's not to take your job from you. It's to push everyone up. If everyone has the right attitude, if they're collaborative and they're willing to work together. That's all it takes. Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Or girl. But it's typically dudes. Dudes are bad with ego. Women do better with ego than men do. So that's a funny little story for you. Just to wrap up.
Just to put
a bow on this conversation. So 10 years in about 40 minutes here on the podcast. Thank you guys for listening. We went a little bit long this time, but trying to jam 10 years in is a lot. I tried to give you guys some nuggets. Hopefully you guys can literally got some of the advice from that. And of course, as always, please hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Make some comments on social media. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your experience has been. And definitely, if you found the nuggets that I was trying to point out to you today, let's talk about it on social media. Give us some feedback, however you found this podcast. We appreciate you guys tuning in each and every time. So make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, and look forward to a new episode in 2 weeks on the Neo Marketing Podcast. Until then, good luck.
Ciao.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.